Good afternoon, friends. Welcome to Escambia Citizens Watch Live. I'm John Singley, your host. Today we're going to continue our series on the mayor's transition team. And to address the legal portion of the transition report, we're very honored to have in the studio with us today the legal pillar for the team, Julie Sheppard. Julie, welcome.
Thanks, John. Happy to be here.
Julie, for those of us who've never met you before, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you came to Pensacola, what you've been up to.
Well, I've been practicing law for about a little over 30 years, but I arrived in Pensacola in the mid-90s as the first in-house counsel at the University of West Florida. And I transitioned out of that role and went to IHMC when it became a startup, and we have been independent now for about 15 years. So I'm currently the executive vice president there. Love living in Pensacola. I have two teenage daughters that have grown up here, and architect husband, and it's just been a great place to be.
Looking over your resume on the mayor's transition website, I noticed that all your undergraduate and graduate work were done in Virginia. Are you a Virginia person?
No, I grew up in New England, but I went to Charlottesville undergraduate, go Wahoo Wah, yeah. Basketball team, yay. And then I went back, transitioned back to my home for law school, but decided the South was the place to be and have been here ever since.
It's hard to not like Charlottesville, is it? Beautiful, yeah.
Charlottesville's beautiful.
So Julie, tell us about how you came to be a member of the mayor's transition team.
Well, I was minding my own business, and one night got a call from Grover and said, Julie, would you do this? And like, why me? But yes, I would do anything to help Grover and be successful.
The transition team was tasked to look at current conditions, make observations about what was they saw, and then prepare some recommendations for the mayor. If you would, Julie, walk us through that process.
Sure. Well, it was actually very well put together. We had Quint as our leader, and he had a great staff with DC and Walker and Barbara. And whoever we wanted to interview or whatever documents we wanted, financial information, they were there for us. They put meetings together, and then we would come together as a group and talk about where we were throughout the process, take public comment and input, and it was just a very smooth process. It allowed us all to really concentrate in our area, but also help each other when we had overlap.
You were operating under Florida Sunshine Statute. Was that a plus, a minus, or a wash? How did that affect how you did your work?
I've never not been under Florida Sunshine as part of the university system, IHMC. So for me, it was no problem. I think that it just allowed us to be very transparent and open. I think it gave a lot of people honestly, they wanted to come and talk to us and be on record. And I think it was very helpful.
When I was reading your report, and honestly, there's not a lot of attorneys at city government, but it appeared that you were looking at processes as much as you were looking at individuals. Is that a fair statement?
Yes. I started out by meeting with all the department heads and as many of the city council staff as wanted to meet. And what I was really looking for is what they needed from legal staff. And, that naturally rolled into ordinances, policies. With the change to an executive mayor, there was a lot of uncertainty about the roles. And so that came out in a lot of my interviews.
The structure, you made recommendations to realign the structure of how legal support is provided to the city government. Can you talk about that?
Yes. The actual office of the city attorney was very understaffed. There was one attorney, one paralegal, and a public records person. So it was impossible for them to handle a lot of requests for assistance. It wasn't that there weren't other attorneys in city government, they just weren't housed in an office where they could help each other and give each other assistance. And so what appeared to be happening was requests weren't being made to the city attorney for assistance. And so what I tried to do in my report is look at what resources they were there and see how they could be more impactful if we could bundle those resources together where they could assist each other.
Julie, one of the things that we noticed on social media in the last year to year and a half is a lot of questions by people over use of outside counsel. Was this as a result of the understaffing, or was it a result of the organizational structure that you looked at?
That's a great question. I think law has become very specialized, and so a great number of the outside counsel being used were in very specialized areas, what I would call energy, aviation, transportation, collective bargaining. And I think that's a natural process that legal offices are going through where you really need specialization. However, there were areas that were being sent outside that good in-house people with a sophisticated staff should be able to do.
Yeah, I heard the mayor's press conference. Well, you may be watching this tomorrow or the next day, but this week's press conference, it seems maybe your report and recommendations had impact. The mayor he talked at great length about adding attorneys and consolidating functions, and he even mentioned something that they're doing more things like looking at leases and things. So if you want, I'll give you credit for maybe sparking the mayor to thinking this is something that, or reinforcing thoughts that he may already had, that this was something that needed his attention right up front. What were you hearing from the department head specifically about accessing legal support?
Well, there were no negatives. I wasn't hearing negatives, but what I was hearing is that they felt that they could do better negotiation of contracts, and they could handle conflict better if they had access. One department head specifically said in past administrations, when the office was very well staffed, he could tell at difficult stages in negotiations, if he invited one of the city attorneys into the negotiation, he got a lot more out of his contract. He got better pricing, he got there was a whole different tenor in the negotiations with the other side. And that's what we were really trying to get back to. How do we strengthen the office so that it really works for the departments, and then it works for the city taxpayers, because they're getting better contracts out of the departments, and everything's working smoother.
When you have centralized legal support or any critical function, engineering support or communication support, the entire group of attorneys in this case, then they really answer to a single supervisor pretty much, which would align their functions fairly well, as opposed to having specialized staff scattered throughout the various departments who are answering to department heads. It seems to bring county government, the city government, into better alignment. I've seen that in the military many times before. They call it stovepiping, where these functions all are split out. So you made some recommendations to the mayor. Would you like to run through those for us?
Sure, I would be happy to do that. One of the biggest recommendations that I made was access, that I felt like all city departments, the city council, even boards and commissions, and I would especially say volunteer boards and commissions, that they needed access. They needed to understand what the public records law is. They needed to understand what a public meeting was. And if you're a volunteer, you're doing it out of the goodness of your heart, but maybe you don't know if you have a conflict because you've never been trained in what a conflict would be. So I felt that access was one of the big keys to moving the city along with the legal issues. And to have that kind of access, that moved into my second recommendation, which was a fully staffed and knowledgeable group of city attorneys that understood municipal law, that understood contracts and grants, that understood public records and public meetings, understood conflict and negotiation skills, and that could help each other. And then the third area was responsiveness. It doesn't do any good to send people to the city attorney's office if they're not responsive. And so those were the really three key areas that I honed in on.
Well, once again, Mayor Robinson you must have struck a chord with him or reinforced his previous thinking that this needs my attention right away. And as he said in his press conference earlier, he's making moves now to get into this. So you work on the transition team, doing your civic duty, as the mayor has asked for your support, backed up by Mr. Studer and his team. But you also have a day job.
I do.
Yeah, and I was reminded of that several days ago when looking at the Washington Post, and lo and behold, there's a picture of a robot walking on a balance beam. And I thought, this is so cool. This sounds like something that IHMC. So I started reading. Lo and behold, there's a story about IHMC in Pensacola, Florida, doing wonderful things with a group out of Boston, having to do with robotics and controller robotics. What was that all about?
Well, we have been lucky to have this Atlas robot that Boston Dynamics built, and we won a competition several years ago and won a monetary prize, but we won the robot. So over time, we've been working with this Boston Dynamic Atlas robot to make it more smooth, to be able to do more things like a human could do. And your particular story that was on every probably major network showcased the Atlas robot in our robotics lab in Pensacola, walking across a balance beam, uneven terrain, really being very flexible and doing the kind of things that a human could do, with the long-term goal that we would send a robot into a dangerous situation and try to save a human. And that's kind of the exciting work that my team is doing.
You brought some pictures about this effort, didn't you?
I did. I brought some. We have a great innovative team at IHMC, and there's a lot of innovation in the robotics lab. We have some of the best engineers and computer scientists in this field. And so I thought I'd share with you some pictures of IHMC, its campus footprint, our new building that houses the robotics lab, some of our new robots. We have a powered exoskeleton to help paralyzed people walk. We have just won an award for a new, very dynamic, flexible robot called Nadia. If you remember Nadia Comaneci, a robot that can transform very easy. But our Atlas robot is doing great things. We've worked with the Pensacola Fire Department and having the Atlas robot, help and maybe possibly look at robots in the future helping fight fires. We have NASA's robot Valkyrie that we're helping with movement to be able to be a team member in space. So it's some really interesting innovation going on in the robotics world.
So IHMC does research and develops patents, is that correct? Is that your main product?
Yeah, research is probably our main product. Our customer is usually the federal government, DoD agencies, NASA. We try to work on solutions to problems that humans are having, and we try to enhance the human solution through technology. And so you will always see it's the Institute for Human and Machine Cognition, because we always put the human first and try to develop technology to enhance the humans. Robotics is just one area. We do work in cybersecurity and visualizations, human performance enhancement, sensory substitution, natural language understanding. It's a very fun place to work. It's always innovative, and we're always chasing the next fun challenge.
I want you to hold that thought, but human performance enhancement. For us public school people, tell us a little bit of what that means, huh?
Well, what we're trying to do is help our warriors, our astronauts, our divers, elite athletes. How do they perform better and longer under stressful situations? How do we enhance the cognitive load? If you're, fly in for 48 hours and
Right.
you get, dropped in the mountains and have to perform. Are there things that we can do to help you with that? If you're being disoriented in space, are there things we can do? We know there's new things with the ketogenic diet. We know there's new things in cognitive functioning. So we're looking at all those type of enhancements that could make soldiers, warriors, astronauts, divers more resilient and perform better.
Julia, this is fascinating. Clearly the work over there is focused outward beyond the boundaries of Escambia County, but you also reach out to the community at large, right? That you mentioned earlier in a visit with you about a podcast that you do over there.
Yes, so, anybody that knows Ken Ford knows he's probably, he never sits on his laurels, so he's always moving to the next exciting thing. We had done programs for years with evening lectures and Science Saturday and robotics camp, but we know that younger people are really into podcasts. So about 2 years ago, he started a podcast for the most interesting people in science and medicine, and it's been phenomenally successful. We have a lot of great experts coming in and talking about not just their expertise in their field, but how did you get into that field?
Right.
We all get into fields different ways, and sometimes it's just you have a great teacher that made you interested, but sometimes it's just by accident. And so to me, the interesting part of those STEM talks is what kind of put somebody in that area that they're now an expert in.
How do you recruit talent at IHMC in Pensacola, and the level of your workforce, your talent pool over there, is it growing?
Yes, I would say it's growing. We recruit by having a really innovative culture. We don't, we're not a traditional employer. We don't have a lot of rules and policies in place. We allow people to kind of, if you get your mojo on at 3 p.m. because you're on a program all night long, that's okay with us. We're not. We don't have like you mentioned, John, we don't have a lot of clients here. So while we have a lot of clients that visit us on a regular basis, we're fine with allowing people to work when they're really successful. We also pay well. We try to attract the best and brightest and give them a culture that they can shine in. But we also have found that Pensacola is a great place to recruit people to, especially, February and March when it snowed for 4 months in, Chicago or Boston or other places. And
where do you find this talent?
Well, we're always looking for talent. We always have ads in kind of like, the engineering trade magazines and the artificial intelligence magazines, and we're always going to conferences and talking about IHMC. It helps that we get a lot of publicity, and we have a lot of visitors, so we're always opening our doors to groups that come, and that always turns into people sending unsolicited resumes or proposals. We partner really well, so we partner with a lot of organizations and universities, and a lot of times we get resumes from people like that.
Julie, in our last couple of minutes here, up against the clock here, one thing that came up during the port study, maybe a year ago it started, was this whole idea that IHMC and other partners put forward of using portions of our port infrastructure for what was being called blue technology. What does IHMC see for the future of this area and blue technology?
I like the C.
Yeah.
So we think there's a real opportunity in Northwest Florida for us to shine, Northwest Florida as a whole, to shine in the area of ocean technologies, whether it's sensor technologies, whether it's marine research, whether it's any kind of ocean technologies. We see that as the future: oceanographic robotics, just aquaculture, and we think that there's the right mix of people with the universities and the high school career academies and the work that the county estuary programs are doing, that that there's a real future in Northwest Florida in the area of ocean technologies. And we're especially excited about trying to develop some work that we could retain our students who get degrees here in our area and not send them to Woods Hole into Sarasota, but have jobs here.
Well, we've run into here in the studio a number of marine biologists who all are UWF graduates, but all had to leave. Some of them have returned.
Yes.
So I think that is a great future.
And retired military who have worked over at Stennis and other places.
Stennis,
and,
that's a producer. That's a subject for another day. The Stennis facility over there, as well as over here at Panama City.
Yes, we do a lot of work with the Naval Avocational Dive Unit and the Naval Surface Warfare Center. So there's a lot of resources in Northwest Florida in that space.
Julie, this has been exciting. Julie Sheppard, the Vice President, Executive Vice President at IHMC and their Chief Legal Counsel, if you couldn't tell, and also a member of the Mayor's Transition Team who delivered the report here recently, has been our guest today. This has been exciting, Julie. We could go on and on and on, a lot to talk about. Very interesting.
Thanks, John.
And I hope that those of you who have been watching have learned a little bit more about what was in the transition report, as well as what's going on down at IHMC. It's been our pleasure to have you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Until our next episode, this is John Singley saying thank you for joining with us, and have a great day wherever and whenever you are.